This is Dark Boyer again. I want to talk about a lot of angry white guys. Angry white females too. I'm suspecting there's one that I'm talking to right now. Guys, you guys bring up a lot of things that they're very don't get me wrong, on an individual level are significant to a point, but on a very on a national scale they're insignificant in measuring racism and severity. You guys bring up, whites can't say the word nigger, but black people can say the word cracker. First of all, we have to look at what the words mean. Okay, cracker is a racial epithet historically used towards whites because of racism. It is. Now, some blacks may just use it just to demean whites, or try to demean whites in the manner that they want to. But how significant is it? I mean, it's as if you are suffering from a belief system that's creating oppression. I just don't see that. I just see that whites are many times overreacting towards these isolated incidences of reverse discrimination, racism, blacks having an attitude toward them. It is not significant compared to the subtle and result-oriented discrimination and stereotypes that black people face every day. It's just not. And some of you will say, well, blacks have racism in their head. Especially, you will talk about, well, they're always crying racism, but Africans, West Indians, English, Italians, they made it, they assimilated. Well, let me tell you something. I'm West Indian, and I have West Indian background. My parents were immigrants, but I can assure you that all immigrants, even black immigrants, have not had the history that African Americans have. Okay, first of all, we're talking about 40 years after a legal document of civil rights has been passed. Okay, 40 years compared to 300 plus years of slavery and Jim Crow. And I do understand that the North was less racist. They still had subtle racism. It was less severe. But you must realize that most African Americans lived in the South post 1965. Yes, they made some migrations to the North, but still, maybe 1945. Maybe there was that migration, and it continued up to the North. But most blacks lived, I would say, about post pre-1950 in the South. So they suffered Jim Crow. That thing has not been dissolved until 40 years. It was written 40 years ago. I mean, you still had segregationists. If you don't believe there were segregationists in 1965 when they written the Civil Rights Bill, you're pretty naive. And they probably were there still until maybe 10, maybe 5, I would say about 10 years. So really, we're talking about 30 years. 30 years compared to 300 years. You have not experienced that. White Americans certainly haven't experienced it. Black immigrants have not experienced it. Other white immigrants have not experienced it. So I find it very arrogant and very haughty by people saying that they should be equal right now. They should secede. Crime should be down. They should be progressed. They should have already equaled whites right now. And the reason why is because they don't want to. I find that very arrogant. I mean, do you see how patronizing that is? Do you realize, some of you whites and blacks too, and I'm talking about black Americans too, have made it. Do you realize how patronizing that is? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not one of these people who believe that everything can be blamed on whites. The drug problem, some conspiracy anti-racists say that the CIA gave blacks drugs in the black neighborhood. Well, I'll tell you what, man. The reason why the CIA gave you those drugs is because you wanted those drugs. So therefore, you have to stop the demand. If there's no black demand in those neighborhoods, I don't care if the KKK offer those drugs. So really, we can't blame the top, the ruling class. I don't really necessarily agree, but we cannot, even if there was a ruling class of whites who wanted to purposely keep blacks in the ghetto, American blacks in the ghetto, we can't blame the ruling class for selling you drugs that you want. Did they put a gun to your head? So the question is, how do you stop the demand for these drugs? How do you stop the demand? You stop the demand, and that's gotta be solved in the African American community. I can't solve it. I mean, West Indian people that are in the African American community need help, I guess, yeah. But white America is not going to solve that. So I'm not one of those people who believe that everything can be blamed on whites. However, I find it very patronizing for some white guy who lives on a fucking some upper and middle class neighborhood, or some black person lives up in a middle class neighborhood for that matter, but predominantly whites, because disproportionately amount of those whites continue to make these dumb arguments, to have the nerve to act like hey, I understand, and I could have gotten, and you know what, if it was us, we would have gotten our ass out. You don't know. You have not shared that type of history. You got no business telling somebody else, another group that has shared that type of history, when to make it. That's all I gotta say. Have a nice day.